Suzanne is a travel writer, a memoirist, and a poet who was named the next great travel writer by National Geographic Traveler magazine. Her books of nonfiction include the 2012 National Outdoor Book Award winning Almost Somewhere, 28 Days on the John Muir Trail. More recently, unfortunately published during COVID, were two new books from University of Nebraska Press, which she'll be talking about tonight. The first one is called Bad Tourist, Misadventures in Love and Travel. And then the other one is called Animal Bodies, on death, desire, and other difficulties. Suzanne is also the author of 4 collections of poetry, as well as numerous magazine articles, travel pieces, journalism. When I think of Suzanne's writing and I think of this book, it's really what I think is most interesting is whether traveling the world or ending a relationship, Suzanne's work is always lyrical, self-aware, and just full of this vibrant curiosity and engagement with the world. She's kind of the best of tour guides. She's the person you're going to learn tons from. She's going to show you and take you to places you never thought you wanted to go, and then you're very happy you're there. And she's the person you want to have a drink with after the tour is done. Whether she's writing of fleeing a mudslide or an affair that results in both heartbreak and liberation, or the grief of losing loved ones, her work is marked by a poet's love of language, an adventurer's willingness to risk, see, and record, and a memoir's ability to reflect and place their own experience in that larger context. So it's not about her. Her writing's really about us all. If I had to say one thing about her work from the very beginning that has always stood out to me, it's that it's about the idea of learning to accept yourself and how incredibly hard that can be. And it's about learning not only to accept, but to, even love yourself, no matter how hard the world makes it for you. And so I love her work for that message. So Suzanne, welcome.
I'm going to read from 2 of my books. This is my first memoir. I had it with me, so I thought I'd show it to you, but it's called Almost Somewhere. It's about hiking the John Muir Trail, and I don't think they have that for sale, but I have 1 copy, and I'm happy to sell it to you. It's like not messy or anything. I just brought it because I thought I didn't know if I'd read out of it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to read out of my 2 pandemic releases. So it was really hard having a book come out during the pandemic, especially a book of travel when nobody could go anywhere, and all my events got canceled. But my press agreed to publish my next book. They pushed it up because I promised them that I would read from both books as a way to sort of get this book out in the world too. So it's still new to me, even though it came out in 2020. I haven't read out of it at all, except for on Zoom. And so you're sort of one of my first audiences to hear essays from Bad Tourist. Bad Tourist is it's an anti-travel guide. Okay, it's what not to do when traveling. It's deeply personal. It is about the world. 15 different countries are in this book, but it's also about me and my relationships. The subtitle is Misadventures in Love and Travel, because they really are misadventures. And in the book, I realize it spans like 15 years. I realize I want to leave a husband and travel the world, and then I meet another man and end up marrying him. He's my current husband. And it gives you kind of a sense of how long this journey took me. I've been married now 12 years. So most of these essays took place 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that kind of thing. I'm really slow as a writer. So if you are practicing creative writing and you're thinking, why does it take me so long to write a story? It takes me forever. It takes a long, long time. My first book took me 20 years to write. And I once gave a reading and someone asked, why did it take you so long? And I said, "Are you a writer?" And the man said, "Yes." And I said, "Then you should know." So I'm going to start by reading the first essay out of this book. The essay is called The Love Test, and it takes place in the United States. Some of the essays do. It takes place in Everglades National Park in Florida. Has anybody ever been there? Yes, a few of you. Have any of you ever been kayaking? Okay, oh good, we've got kayakers. So I write about the outdoors a lot. I write about travel, adventure, wilderness, and all of that. And this is an essay about sort of when I first met my current husband. And he set up this kayaking trip as a love test. Have you ever done that to somebody? You see if they're right for you by put them through a little test. Well, this is called the love test. I had a suspicion then, which has since been confirmed, that this was my relationship test. Don't pretend you've never been subjected to one or devised one yourself. We were camped at the deserted Highland Beach 100 miles into a 150-mile kayaking trip in the Gulf of Mexico, paddling from Florida's Everglades City to the Flamingo Visitor Center and back. My practical to the extreme and water-savvy new boyfriend had been a kayaking instructor with Outward Bound, and he wanted to make sure his new girlfriend, me, could make such a trip. By the third 20-mile kayaking day, my forearms squeaked like rusty door hinges when I tried to move my wrists or hands. Later, I learned the medical term for this, crepitus, making it sound like the death of an arm, which in some ways it was. On the fourth day, we ran over a shark in the shallow waters between mangroves, and I had a tantrum, which was quite a feat considered I was squeezed into my kayak compartment like a wrapped mummy. "It's just a nurse shark," practical boyfriend said. "So?" I screamed. "Shark!" "Calm down. I don't even think they have teeth." I grew up at the height of the Jaws paranoia, so the sight of a dorsal fin brought me back to my 6-year-old self and the trochaic meter of the Jaws music, the thrashing and blood blooming like red begonias under the sea. One has to wonder why parents ever let their small children see such a film. And for the record, nurse sharks do have teeth. I was surely passing the test. I had paddled through my crepitus, and I didn't sink the boat during our shark encounter. I even agreed to hitting a fellow boater over the head with my paddle, if needed. A school group was out at a rough point, not ironically called Shark Point. Their canoes had tipped in the wind, and the waves lashed at their boats and their now submerged bodies. They were screaming a lot. "Listen," practical boyfriend said, "I have a tow line. We've got to go get them." "We do?" My question was not rhetorical. Apparently, this particular corner of ocean was popular with the hammerheads, who even practical boyfriend admitted had teeth. But he had been a Boy Scout and an outdoor trip leader, and there was no way we were going to paddle past the group in their time of need. They were all bobbing about the angry gray sea like eggs boiling in a pot. One of their canoes was upside down, the other beyond their reach. "But if they try to grab you," practical boyfriend warned, "hit them with a paddle so they don't capsize the boat." I was poised, but still full of doubt. How could I crack the head of someone in need with my hard plastic paddle? I certainly would have failed that test. Thankfully, practical boyfriend saved the day with his tow line and his quick wits, and no head smashing was called for. That night, we arrived to Highland Beach on our way up to Everglades City and set up practical boyfriend's small blue tent between 2 palm trees. We watched bald eagle steal fish from osprey, the salty sky turned blue to pink, and a mackerel jumped from the sea, glinting silver. Crab shells littered the edge of the shore, shining white like bones. The sun streaked across the sea, a tunnel of light reaching the sand. The wind whistled the palm fronds above and kept the black flies away. A hawk caught in a draft of wind flashed a brown triangle of wing, a red tail. We drank red wine from a box and I watched as Practical Boyfriend cooked dinner. 3 pelicans glided by, and the line between sea and sky shined like glass. I dug my toes into the sand, the million tiny broken stones and shells. An osprey called overhead. A flock of orange-beaked oyster catchers darted above the water. We looked out over the horizon. Pelicans were silhouettes in the darkening sky. As the constellations appeared, Practical Boyfriend pointed them out, deciphering the syntax of stars, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Orion's belt. The tide unrolled a curtain onto the sand, surging and retreating, leaving behind beautiful corpses of conch shells, pink and temporal. Raccoons scurried to the tide pools, pulling the flesh from shells. Then the wind carried clouds, obscuring the stars, as if they were covered by a gauzy net, a veil. And then the flashing light bloomed in the distance. "Are those explosions?" I asked. "I'm not sure what that is," Practical Boyfriend said. "Maybe lightning." "How could that be lightning? It looks like a fireworks show." The light erupted like a volcano, a commotion of orange and yellow along the line between the black sky and gray sea. We listened to the marine radio with its mechanical warnings to small craft about electrical storms, high seas, and winds. "I guess you were right," I said, "but I've never seen lightning like that before." We sat on the sand looking at the flashing horizon. The storm still seemed so very far away. We woke at dawn, and the radio issued new, more urgent warnings to the small craft that had not heeded the initial announcements. The rain fell in pleats against the nylon roof and walls of the tent. The ground beneath us shook with the rumble of thunder, but still an ocean away. Or so it seemed. Practical Boyfriend wasn't worried, and so we reached for each other. Then the rain turned to hailstones, and the small tent lit up with each new bolt of lightning. The distant thunder became detonations on our sandy beach, between our 2 lovely palms, around our little love tent. "Listen," Practical Boyfriend said. "If anything happens, here's how you call out on the radio." He showed me. "What do you mean anything? Why would I call? Who would I call? If anything happens to me." This was not a man who overreacted, so I tried to concentrate on what button to push and when. "And we better get in lightning position," he said, between cracks of thunder and flashes of lightning. The air smelled like burning things, and my hair stood on end. Until that moment, I had always thought of this as cliché. But sometimes there's truth in cliché. "Okay," I said, "lightning position." "What's that?" Practical Boyfriend demonstrated. He rolled up his sleeping pad, kneeling on it. I copied him. "You have to have your knees and feet together," he said. "So if we're hit by ground current, there's one entry and exit place. It's safer that way." Ground current? He said, "Yes, kneel like this." And so I did. I didn't find out what this meant until later, that if lightning struck close enough, it could reach us by traveling down one of our palm trees and through the sand. Practical Boyfriend knew a fellow outdoor leader who had died exactly this way. One point of entry and exit means less burning of the body. There we kneeled, naked and knees together on our camping pads. Now closer, the thunder sounded like bombs exploding nearby. When it got to be too much, I started to cry. "It'll be okay," Practical Boyfriend said. The blue tent lit up with each strike, followed by another crashing kaboom, and the smell of something like sulfur. I was scared, but it wasn't that. Well, at least not exactly that. "I have to go poo," I finally admitted. The fear plus this crouching knee-together kneeling position meant I might not be able to hold it. It's one thing to be scared of sharks in front of a new boyfriend, or even fail to smash a fellow boaters on the head with your paddle, should you need to. This was another thing entirely. But Practical Boyfriend reached for his net beanie, and he said those 6 words every woman longs to hear. "You can poop in my hat." Practical Boyfriend had not yet told me he loved me, nor said that he even liked me. But because of my practiced yoga postures, a strong will, sheer embarrassment, and an offering of the hat that I interpreted as true love, I was able to hold off until the storm finally moved on, and I could sprint from the tent and squat in privacy behind a palm. In the end, it was Practical Boyfriend who passed the test. Practical Boyfriend would eventually become Practical Husband. And for the record, I have never, ever pooped in his hat. So my essays cover a lot of things that we don't talk about in polite company. I talk about infidelity, my own. I talk about abortion. I talk about peeing and pooping and throwing up. All the things, right, that we deny about our own sort of animal natures, okay? And so I talk about those things in this book. I've got an essay about getting super sick in Peru. I traveled alone, and my biggest fear was getting sick by myself, and of course that happened. But I'm here to tell you, right, that I'm okay, I survived. So I think sometimes when we face the thing that we're most afraid of and we live through it, it makes us stronger for the next hard thing. Because sometimes we live through things that are so hard, we think, I can't do this, but we do it, right? We have to do it anyway. And so though this is a travel book, and though I, go through, 15 different countries, it's also very much a book about being human and about my own struggles with who I am and finding love and all of that. But I wanted to read you a slightly longer piece from Animal Bodies that the title, right, comes from that idea of our own animal bodies. And the book has a lot of loss in it, a lot of grief in it, because I suffered a lot of loss in the last 5 years. I lost my dad when I was really young. I was 24, and that was really hard. But then I sort of was in the good news line for a really long time. Like, I think sometimes we're in the good news line and we're like, it's always going to be like this, but it isn't. And then I got into the bad news line for a while, and one of my very best friends died. My mom died, and then, like you all, right, I suffered other kinds of losses. COVID, right? I lost a friendship because of political differences. I have an essay about my dog, which I won't read because I don't want to make you cry. It's an essay that makes everybody cry because we all love our pets so much, don't we? But I'm going to read you an essay about scattering my parents' ashes. And I want to tell you that if you think a part is funny, it's okay to laugh. I used a really dark humor in order to talk about the hardest things in life because I think that it helps us face them. And, I've said this and people think I'm crazy, but in some ways there's nothing funnier than death. And the reason why is because humor relies on the element of surprise, right? Like when we see something that's incongruous, like we're driving down the road and there's, a giant statue of a porcupine. We might be like, oh my God, that's funny, right? Because we don't expect to see a giant porcupine on the road or at some other kind of roadside attraction. And we are always surprised when someone we love dies. Like, we know they're going to die, like maybe they have cancer or something, but then when they die, we're like, where did they go? Right? It's always a surprise, and so I think even when it's coming, it's a surprise. And so I'm going to read you an essay about scattering my parents' ashes, okay? And it's called Mother Keeps Daddy on the Shelf, which she did do for many years. So, but as I said, if you find parts of it funny, don't feel like you're not allowed to, express that, because I sometimes feel like if I wasn't laughing, I would be crying. And it's one of the last essays in this book. There are 2 essays that follow it. And it was originally the last essay, but then I added the other 2. Mother Keeps Daddy on the Shelf. 1. Mother places Daddy on the bookshelf between Dante and Shirley MacLaine. I go to my old room where Mother keeps teddy bears, Dr. Seuss, Barbie's Dream House. For your children, she says. I am 24, and I lie on the narrow bed, stare at the seafoam ceiling, try to ignore my beating heart. Later, Mother asks me if I want him. I imagine breaking the seal of the smooth wooden urn, the wind scissoring through the seagrass, the air tasting like brine, the echo of memory like the wheels of my girlhood wagon over the wooden planks of the Fire Island boardwalk. When I was little, we had a small house in Fair Harbor, and Daddy taught us how to swim and dig for clams there. It was a place he would collaborate with other writers from New York City, where, for a few sunlit moments, he could dip into the ocean and escape the black hole of his depression. I imagine sifting through the fragments of gray bone, offering him to the sky, watching him float over the Fire Island dunes, settling among the driftwood, shells, and beach glass, released to the eastern sky and the Atlantic Ocean. Mother said, "No, absolutely not. You aren't taking him anywhere. He's just fine here with me." When I come back to visit Mother, I look for Daddy, but he's no longer on the shelf. "Hey, Mom," I shout to her through the walls of her townhouse. "Where's Daddy?" She walks into the den, ignores my question, is humming the melody from the music of the night, occasionally singing the few words she knows. "What have you done with Daddy?" Mother walks past me into the cupboard, opens it, and says, "He's right here. He's fine." "What's this?" I ask, pointing to the file of facts on top of Daddy's urn. "Oh, those are his divorce papers from all his ex-wives." "You mean both?" "That's right." Mother sings la-dee-da-doo, her mouth like a peony opening and closing. Later, I sneak into the den to steal Daddy. Not all of him, just some. Daddy, I decide, has done enough time on shelves and in filing cabinets. I open the box, scoop out a few spoonfuls of ash into a Ziploc baggie, and stuff it into my suitcase. At airport security, I wonder if anyone will see the bone fragment and ask me what it is. But they don't. I bring the baggie of ash to Mammoth Mountain. It's a ski resort in California. When I announced at age 6 that I wanted to learn how to ski, it had been Daddy who brought me to Mammoth. Now, all these years later, he is tucked into the pocket of my ski jacket. All day, I feel invincible. At the end of the day, I stand in the afternoon light atop the cliff's edge looking out at the minarets. 3 of my girlfriends look on. I take out the baggie and wait for a gust of wind. I shake the baggie into it, watching the ash swirl over the edge. My throat tightens, and my eyes water beneath my goggles, which takes me by surprise. Christine and Jen lean on their ski poles. After a few seconds, Brenda says, "Say a few words?" But I can't. So I shake my head and smile. I wave my ski pole to my friends as if to say, "Let's go." And we drop into the chute. We cut fast turns into the wind-buffed snow behind us. When I return home from Mammoth, I call my mother and say, "You know, I stole some of Daddy." "I know you did. Do you care?" "No, but he wanted to be spread under the rose bush. So why don't you put him there?" "It's cold out there at night. Besides, if I have to have my fence redone, they'll dig him up." I think about this, and it seems like she has a point. "I took him out of the closet, and he's back on the shelf," she says. "I told you, he's fine where he is." "What about spreading Daddy's ashes at Fire Island?" I ask again. "With Kathy and Cindy, the 4 of us. He would like that." "I thought you already threw your part away on top of a mountain." "I didn't throw it away. It was just a tiny bit." "Fire Island's not the same as it was," she says. "It's all mansions there now." Everything changes, but Fair Harbor still has some of the original houses. Wouldn't you like to see it again? "We'll see," Mother says. My parents had always wanted to travel to Hawaii together. When they planned to go, Daddy was too sick, so soon after he died, Mother and I went together. Many years later, we were planning another mother-daughter Hawaii trip, But the week before we were to leave, Mother ends up in the hospital with lung cancer. She says, "Go with your husband." After she dies, Tom and I leave for Kauai, and I bring my parents not the big bags of ash, just enough. On our way to release them at the edge of the cliff, we pass a rooster with a crushed foot and a woman who is chemo bald. Newlyweds pose on the rocks below, taking wedding photographs. As the wind takes the bone fragment, the light reflects silver on the ocean, and two white-tailed tropic birds soar above. It is all there, suffering and beauty, love and death, endings and the flight of new beginnings. My sisters and I book the trip to Fire Island. I pull the big bags of bone fragment out of their respective urns, a cedar box for Daddy that the lady at the mortuary shamed us into buying, and a broken plastic box for Mother, the cheapest option, which is what she would have wanted. I put Daddy in first. When I try to place Mother into the suitcase, ash spills out all over the bottom of my case. I pull the bag out, and even though I have double bagged her, ash scatters everywhere. By the time I hurry the bag into a third jumbo freezer bag, my suitcase, bedroom floor, and clothes are covered with ash. "Mother," I say, "I know you're doing this on purpose, but I don't care what you say, you're going to Fire Island." I shove her in next to Daddy, who is sitting at the bottom of my suitcase, neatly behaved. Try this to get this up here. Before she dies, that's better, Mother says, "If I pop off, you can keep me and Daddy in your closet." "No way," I say. "You're going to the ocean or coming with me to Burning Man." "No water," she says, "and you better not take me to the desert either. Maybe I can go on top of that mountain with Riva," it's my dog, "so I can look after you." But then she says, "But that would be too cold in the winter, wouldn't it? The closet's better." And as it turns out, I take both parents to Hawaii and to Burning Man. I let a bit of her go on top of Mount Talak and in the same place as Daddy at the top of Chair 23 in Mammoth, too. And every time my father's ashes float away, but when it comes to Mother, the wind picks up or shifts every time, coating me with her ash. In this way, we continue our arguments long after she's gone, and she always gets the last word. I set my clothes on top of my parents, zip up my suitcase, and say, "Off to Fire Island." At airport security, my luggage is pulled from the conveyor. The agent points to the suitcase and says, "Is this yours?" I nod and follow him. He brings up, I think is this a way to tie it here? Here, I got it. There we go. All right, I'm going to start at that section. He brings up the picture on the screen and points at the two plastic bags of ash. He tells me he is going to open my bag, and I nod again. He unzips my suitcase, pushes aside my clothes and toiletries, and there they are. "What is this?" he asks, but it seems like he already knows. "Those are my parents." He looks me in the eye and he says, "I'm supposed to go through these." I start to cry, which surprises me, though I have learned that the waves of grief can come any time. And then I hear Mother saying, "Well, if I've got to get fondled, at least he's cute." Now I'm standing there with tears on my face, trying not to laugh. This, more than anything, defines those who are grieving, crying but trying not to laugh, laughing and trying not to cry. Always, always feeling everything alongside its opposite. He pushes my clothes back over my parents, closes the lid of my suitcase, and says in a very quiet voice, "But I'm not going to. I'm sorry for your loss." I zip my suitcase, pull it onto the ground, thank him, and roll my bag toward the terminal. When I tell Kathy and Cindy my mother's ash spilled all over, that I was stopped at security, they say, "That's so Sheila," meaning my mother. They have known her since our father married her when they were 14 and 17. We decide to spread the ashes at dawn when the beach is empty. I carry both bags in my backpack, and they feel heavy, but something about that feels right too. We walk along the beach until the first rays of sunlight appear on the watery horizon. It's time. We walk to the water's edge. I unzip my pack and hand over Daddy to my sisters. I pull out Mother. We look at each other, open our bags, which takes me longer now because Mother is triple bagged, and we dump the ash into the water. There is no wind carrying them away as I had imagined. There is only a cloudy swirl in the dark blue ocean and gray specks in a white sea foam. I can hear Mother say, "No water!" But I know this isn't for her. This is for me and my sisters. We need to let Daddy go there. And wouldn't she be angrier if we hadn't brought her along? I pull my empty backpack over my shoulders. My sisters and I walk along the beach for a long time in silence. Dawn flickers into day, and our shadows stretch across the wet sand before us. And because Mother always gets her way, I had held back a thimble of her ash and stored it in my jewelry box among the rings and pins she left me. She's tucked away safely in my closet, where she always wanted to be. Well, my mother's British, and so to see my grandparents, we would have to travel back to England, which we didn't do a lot of because she kind of escaped England. And I actually write about that. I write about her quite a lot. She's one of my writing obsessions. She was very, very poor in northern England and actually had to work as a female escort in order to save enough money to be able to leave. And so there is an essay about that in actually there's an essay about that, looking at it in slightly different angles in both of my different books. So I grew up having to travel with my parents. I was also born in New York in upstate, and my parents had that house on Fire Island until I was about 10. So we traveled back from California after we moved there. So I had parents who, even though they didn't have a lot of means, they didn't have a lot of money, we had to travel to see family. So I think that's what sort of got me traveling. And I guess I always thought when I was younger that I could leave all my selves behind that I didn't want to carry around anymore. And the truth is you always bring yourselves with you, even if you're halfway across the world. So I tried to escape myself and just ended up getting to know myself even better. Yeah. I have a real love for Latin America. I've spent a lot of time there. I also love Spain. I lived in Spain for a while, and I know someone wants to ask about Spain, and I may be going back there for a while soon. And I don't know. I think like maybe in a past life I was a Spanish speaker. I speak Spanish very, very badly, but I love hearing it. I think it's beautiful. And the most interesting place I think I've ever been, which I write about quite a bit, is India. It's a sensory, it's like a, buffet for your senses. It's got, the smells of incense and cow poo, right? Because there's wandering cows, and it's got the beautiful sounds of the call from the mosque, and all the colors and the spices, and it's just such a beautiful and amazing country, and it's got so much history. I mean, our country is so young, and you go to a country like that, and that's real history. Yeah. I never know, right, when there's going to be a story. So like I could be in a cafe and nothing's happening, but then I'm writing details down and then something profound happens, or at least profound for me, and I've written down the details, and so I have them, so it adds texture. So both, depending on my aim. Don't expect that people are going to speak your language. I would, if you want to be a traveler, I would learn at least a little bit of other languages. Because even if you're trying, people enjoy that and like that, right? Like when you're, maybe some of you work in the service industry here, if you have someone come and just speak like German or French or Spanish to you, you'd be like, what? Right? You wouldn't be expected to just speak their language, whereas somehow we tend to think, well, why don't they know some English, right? And I chose Spanish because there's 26 countries, and William, the Spanish teacher, am I wrong about that? It's 26? 26 countries that speak Spanish. So for me, I get to go to 26 countries and be able to converse with people. And I can also understand a little bit of Italian and a little bit of Portuguese because they're romantic languages. So I had moved back in with my ex. And part of it was because of money, because I couldn't afford to live by myself. And so I went traveling with him. His name's Tom. And we went to Nicaragua, and that's where we got together. So we had been friends previously. And then we had a long distance relationship. He lived in Florida, I lived in Lake Tahoe. And so this was like, pretty far into our, like, are we dating? Are we not dating? Are we dating? Are we not dating? And we hadn't even like said boyfriend, girlfriend, or I like you, or anything like that. But I knew him pretty well. Yeah, so. The easiest place or story to write about? Okay, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think for me, the easiest places to write about are places I know really well. So I have to be there for a long time, which I think is why I have so much about Latin America. I also write a lot about Lake Tahoe because it's my home. So for me, being there for a while helps. What is my writing process? It is to revise. So when I first sit down to draft, often because I write about such difficult subjects, I imagine that nobody will ever read it and I won't publish it. And there are essays on my computer that nobody has ever read. So I'm not only tricking myself, I'm giving myself permission to not share it. But sometimes I just have to write it to figure out like why I did what I did, or I want to explore something further. And I know an essay's done when it tells a story that I didn't set out to tell, but it's the story that needed to be told. So that takes many revisions. We're talking 100 revisions, okay? So, often I have students who are like, oh, I've revised this 5 times. I don't want to do it anymore. And I'm like, 5? That's still a rough draft, dude. You got to do 500 maybe revisions. And so it's rewriting, reading it out loud when I think it's done, because then I really hear things, I just got a text from a friend who's publishing a book, Gail Brandeis. Her books are lovely. And I'm reading it because I'm going to blurb it, which is like the, writer says nice things on the back. And she texted me, she says, I'm finding all these things. I've read this thing 1,000,000 times, So, she's basically saying, you're going to find things too, but I'm fixing it. And it's like, that's just how it is. And in fact, I've been reading now Animal Bodies, out loud to audiences, and I've already found things that I've told my press that I want fixed on the second printing. So when writing about parents or friends, and you want to keep the relationship, I wouldn't tell them about it, okay? I would write it to completion, but I would allow them to read it before you publish it. And I would ask them if they have suggestions. It doesn't mean you have to take the suggestions. And I would also ask them if they would like their name changed. Okay? So that's if you want to keep the relationship, right? So you're writing about friends and family, you want to keep the relationship, that's kind of how you do it, right? My friend Sholay, whose name is spelled wrong in this, has a different opinion about we've traveled the world together. She has a different opinion about everything that's happened, and she's a writer. And so she'll say, oh, no, that's not how that happened. And if she really doesn't like how she's portrayed, there's been times I've just cut sections that don't matter to the piece, or reword them or whatever. And she very much is fine with, with her name being in here. There's an essay about breaking up with a friend over politics. And I changed her name because we've broken up. But she's not going to be happy, I don't think, if she ever reads it. So in that case, I just changed the name, and I would never show it to her. Why? The relationship is over. My ex-husband really wanted me to use his real name, and I didn't. And my current husband really wanted me to change his name, and I didn't. So I don't always listen. But it would be weird for me to be calling my current husband, Tom, something else, especially if he's in the audience. And my ex, who really cares? I don't really care what he thinks. So I think you have to, it's relationship dependent, And then I get the question like, well, what if they sue you? Well, if you change their name and any characteristics, they can't sue you. And in fact, even if you didn't do that and and you're not making anything up, like it's not libel, and it doesn't ruin their chances of working and getting a job or whatever, employment opportunity, they don't have a leg to stand on. So I have a cousin who's really angry with me about, and she said I could use her real name in Bad Tourist. And she was really angry after she read it because she said that I made her sound like a gossip. She was mad that I revealed secrets about our grandparents, and she will no longer speak to me. And I should have, I don't know if I should have had her read it. If I had her read it, she would have said, absolutely not. You can't publish any of that. And like, you can't get to know my mother as a character unless you know she had abusive parents. So that relationship was going to go anyway because she loved me conditionally. She didn't love me unconditionally. And she also wanted to silence me. And when people don't want you to tell their secrets, it's because it disrupts the narrative that they tell themselves, and it's painful for them sometimes, but it's also a form of oppression. It's a form of squashing you down and not allowing you to tell your story, but you've got to make sure it's your story to tell.